Oh, I like the sound of that. The little Andy Griffith this morning. That Andy Griffith theme always sets up a really because it gives him so many happy memories. Puts a smile on my face. And in this segment, of course, that's what we like to do because once people are healthy, they feel a lot better and they're a lot happier. Dr. Jonathan Tripp is joining us from Tripp Family Medicine for Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. You're listening to Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 57 right now. Bill Colley with you too as well, 834. First of all, we're going to be. You've described this as guy talk today.
Yep.
I was just relating a story in the last half hour. I was listening to another talk show one day, and a woman called in and said, "My husband's 58, and he's never once been to see a doctor in his adult life." 58. To get to that point, he's probably healthy, but still.
Right. Yeah. No. In fact, today's topic. Really, we call it guy talk because this is a time where instead of getting nagged about, you should do this, you do that, it's really why should I? Why should I even bother? Because, I'm in the same group. Most guys, most people don't like to go to a doctor. Why? Because they have, memories of when I went to the doctor, it was a bad time, or I was in trouble, or I was sick, or I was hurt. And so to go when you're not hurt or sick really goes against your normal way of thinking. And this is what we're talking about today. And right from the get-go, I want to encourage callers to call in and let us know your stories about when you went or when you didn't go and what happened and why you kind of changed your mind, why that's a good idea. And I'm gonna give you a couple of reasons right from the get-go. And that is, it's catching things early. Things that we don't think we have, or, why should I go? I don't have any symptoms. Or I have this little symptom that, there's probably something wrong, but I really don't want to know about it, and I'm too busy to go check it out anyway. So, and if I go find out there is something wrong, and then that might change what I'm doing, or it might take away some of my favorite habits, or I might have to tell my wife of all things. So there's lots of reasons that play in our psyche about why not to go to the doctor, but I'd like to hear from some of the callers, so.
Well, I want to give the number out, 736-0300, 736-0300. I had a doctor in the late 90s, I guess because I was having some issues with an ulcer at work, working in television news. That was a problem. I think I was not alone, but I remember I found a new family doctor, and as it turned out, we were in the same age. He graduated high school the same year I did. I knew his family. His family runs a business called Welsh Allen, which in the medical industry, they put up most of the stuff on your walls, I guess.
Yep.
But Dr. Allen and I, we really hit it off because of the same generation. He knew some of my relatives, and I could go to him, and I could have unlike previous visits with doctors where I always felt intimidated, he would talk to me just one-to-one.
Yes.
And I found that experience, it made it easy to go back there after that because he would joke and tell stories, and it was things that I could relate to.
Well, and that's part of my purpose when I spend some time with a patient is I'm trying to let them know I can relate to them. In fact, I probably do it a little too much, and I've had patients say, Doc, I really didn't come here to hear about you. I came to talk about me. So that's a fair statement. But, let me give you a quick example. I was in my training and trained under a surgeon, did a lot of cosmetic stuff, but also general surgeon. And at about age 51, he had a heart attack. And I was with him probably about 5 or 6 years after this. And, I was old enough to know that 51 isn't that old. And, he was still working quite hard. But his advice to me was, don't let medicine overtake you. Don't work too hard that it causes you health trouble. Well, you know what? I find myself following in his footsteps. There's so much that can be done, and sometimes you have needs. We went through some financial struggles and had to move from one state to another and during the recession, and I found to open the practice here. I was working full-time at the Air Force Base in their ER and working full-time in my office, and that's a pretty tough thing to do. So I had some health issues start showing up, but do I want to talk to another doctor about that? No, it might slow down what I'm doing. So I'm saying I'm in the same boat. I can relate to these ideas. Do I want everybody in the world to know I got a struggle? No, but if I go way back to those that might be listening, President Reagan was, I think, among the first of the U.S. presidents to ever let some of his health issues show in the public, and it was a great service to the public.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he had cancer that he was willing to talk about, and then later having Alzheimer's, allowing the family to let that go into the public really helped bring awareness to his situations and make it okay for others to talk about it.
I was going to say, sometimes it takes someone, though, in the public eye. And just very quickly, we've got about 20 seconds before the break. We'll let you get the question out, then we'll answer it on the other side. You're on the air.
Okay, I guess one of the things I just want to talk to Doctor about is that a lot of us are kind of losing a little bit of faith in some medicine theories because we hear how cholesterol is good for us, and then cholesterol is bad for us, and butter's good for us, and butter's bad for us, and it seems like everything is changing from one side to the other every day, and we kind of get a little bit confused, you might say, is exactly what is the truth and what isn't, and do they really know what they're talking about?
We'll get to that, Doctor.
Let you guys visit about it.
All right, we'll get to that just on the other side of the break. Dr. Jonathan Tripp from Tripp Family Medicine with us. This is Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. This morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com with Bill Colley. It's 8:40:57. Dr. Jonathan Tripp joining us in studio this morning. Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. He's here until 9 o'clock today. Do want to point out it's 8:43:58 right now. And Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Caller in the last segment had a great question. How can we trust medicine when first butter's bad for us, then butter's good for us, maybe cholesterol's bad for us, then it's not so bad for us? All of the information that we're being bombarded with.
Yeah, in fact, part of the training in medical school is to be a lifelong learner and to realize that things do change, that the evidence as we work harder to prove one way or another that sometimes what we thought all along was the good part or the bad part turns out that we were wrong. Our intuition was just plain wrong. So I love the question about the butter because, I was a kid when they came out and said, it's just absolutely the worst thing you can have for heart disease. And, so everybody kind of went on the bandwagon and said, we'll do margarine because it's safer. Well, then they came out and found out the margarine was actually worse than butter. So, then people turn around and say, well, I guess I'll go back to butter. And the answer is butter's not really good for you either. It tastes great, and it sure is a lot better, flavor than the margarines are. But the truth is it is slightly better. I love the same thing goes with chocolate. Everybody loves chocolate, or at least most of us. And so what's come out lately is that the dark chocolate, not the milk chocolate, but the dark chocolate actually has some health benefits to it. So, but when you look at what the studies really say, a little's good, a lot's not necessarily better. But for those of us that, need an excuse to have a little more chocolate, that's, somebody said somewhere in some study that chocolate's good for you, so why not have a whole bunch? But the answer is moderation is still the key in almost all of these.
I also know, though, too, that part of this may be, part of the fault could be with media, because when I was working in news many, many years ago, if we had a story on the air about some research or a health study, we'd get a call after the show, or several calls about it, asking questions. No one ever called us and asked about the debate at City Hall. They called about the heart study or what foods were good and what were bad. And but we knew that, too, as well, and so we knew that if we just put those glaring headlines up there and danger, or alert or whatever else, that was going to get people's attention.
Sure.
That way we can sell them more soap during the commercial breaks. and so sometimes the hype may be worse than the actual issue.
That is true to some degree. It really depends. In medical school, I hate to confirm the caller's suspicion, but I thought one of the greatest teaching points I had was I had several professors say, half of what we're teaching you is incorrect. The problem is we can't tell you which half because we don't have the information yet. So medicine does change, and to try to be kind of on the cutting edge is difficult but important. We have changes in our guidelines for when we do prostate exams and rectal exams. It used to be every guy at age 40, every year thereafter must do that. We did a lab draw called a prostate-specific antigen, or a PSA. And about 2 years ago, that all changed and said, you know what, unless you have a family history of prostate cancer, it's probably okay to wait till you're 50, and then you start doing the annual exams. And the PSA, they've kind of shied away from because we would find that it was elevated in many cases without cancer. And then as a physician, and especially in our medical legal society, if somebody has an elevated PSA, you're worried about them having cancer, but you know they might not. So you have to send them for biopsies on the prostate, which is no fun, but necessary to prove, hey, you don't have cancer. So we found that we're probably doing a little more harm than good. And the guidelines now are don't do the PSA. Just do the rectal exam if you find something abnormal, and then do the PSA.
We have a caller with us. In fact, the number, if you'd like to reach Dr. Jonathan Tripp while he's in studio, 736-0300, and you're on the air with the doctor.
Well, good morning. Dr. Tripp, you mentioned earlier you want people to call in with their stories, the guys about stuff that they might not know they had, that they had, whatever, and found out by going for, a treatment. I went in, I was 32 years old for a DOT physical, and this was my every 2-year physical for the commercial driver's license. And I peed in a cup, and we tested my hearing and my vision, and I'm a healthy guy, and I was working 50 to 60 hours a week, so tired and fatigued, never thought about it. The nurse come back in and said, well, how long have you been a diabetic? And I looked at her in shock, and I said, well, considering I was here 2 years ago and I wasn't, it's pretty simple to do the math. And long story short, I ended up being a type 2 diabetic, which surprised my doctors because I was a very healthy man. But the dip test in the urine sample showed it, and I was consistently over 400 before treatment for a long time, and I had no idea.
Wow. So you must have just tolerated those high sugars really, unusually well. But I had this same experience, and I appreciate the call because we do DOT physicals, and that's exactly why we're doing those, is to say, hey, are we missing anything that's a big health threat? I just had this maybe a week ago, nice kind of middle 30s age guy, skinny, otherwise healthy. And we happened to do a urine test, and lo and behold, there's a bunch of sugar in his urine. And why was that? Well, he hadn't had blood work done for, 5 years. Why would he? He's an otherwise healthy guy. And so by doing just simple screenings, we can reassure you things are good, or wow, we really need to get on this, because knowing that you have diabetes at 32 instead of at 42, you really get to slow down your heart risk. So for heart attacks, for strokes, your kidney function, so your chances of being around into a ripe old age are much better because you found it at 32. So that's a perfect example of why to check in and just do some basic annual physical stuff.
I know when I've gone for the blood work, I usually come back, especially I guess it's vitamin D deficient, and I'm told that that's very common any longer.
In Idaho, it's pervasive. In fact, if you want to get me off on a whole nother discussion, we'll bring in our local kidney doctor, and we'll talk about vitamin D. But I'm amazed at how, from young to old, almost everybody is deficient in vitamin D in this area.
And that's maybe because we're not out in the sun that often, or?
Well, we're a farther north. I mean, we're not Alaska. That's where it's probably the worst. But we're at a northern latitude, and we have high clouds all winter. So from pretty much October till about April, even though they're not socked in gray weather like you would be in Michigan or Chicago, you still have pretty much blocked sun and cooler weather. So we only get out mostly during the 3 months during the summertime, and then we encourage people to wear sunblock. So we want you to wear sunblock because I do an awful lot of dermatology, take off a lot of precancers and skin cancers. So I'm not saying go without, but the vitamin D is something we can easily supplement with over the counter, and but it is also one that you can overdo. So I really recommend that we use lab blood testing to see where you are before we start treating you. And I found that the over-the-counter actually works better for me than the prescription vitamin D2. So if that's a question for you, come see us. That's something I'm happy to push because it helps with your bone density. often with mood, energy levels. So anybody that comes in and says, hey, I'm fatigued, like the caller did, one of the first things I'd want to check is his vitamin D.
We want to point out the doctor's office is located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office in Twin Falls. And for people who'd actually like to reach out, get a hold of you at the office, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, our office phone number is 208-933-4400. That's 933-4400. Website is trippfamilymedicine.com. And also you can reach us on Facebook at Tripp Family Medicine. So I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to see you. Love to see your kids, your grandkids, whoever we have, the whole family.
The caller brought up a point that I just kind of picked up on when he mentioned he was working 50 to 60 hours a week, which is also fairly common in this part of the country too, because it's such an agricultural intensive place. One of my best friends from school is a dairy farmer, and he's you'd look at him and he is just muscle on muscle on muscle. But that still doesn't mean that he shouldn't go on a regular basis at 53 years old and get a checkup done.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't hardly matter the age. We think, well, these screenings that start at about age 50 is a good time to come in. That's beautiful because we're looking for colon cancer, we're looking for prostate cancer, we're checking for cholesterol and diabetes. So we're trying to avoid upcoming issues like heart attacks and strokes as well as cancers. But at any age, because, I have a young man who's perfectly healthy appearing and ended up having cancer, said, hey, I got this little thing I want you to look at. And we did, and, it was not normal and turned out to be metastatic cancer. So could we have cured that earlier? In his case, probably not, but most, if we find a little thing, it's easy to get rid of. In fact, I just got done doing a bunch of sports physicals for the high school age kids. And when I do a sports physical with a young man, I talk about testicular exams. You only have to do it 4 times a year, and all you're looking for is little lumps and bumps on the testicle. If you have it and it doesn't hurt, check it out. If it hurts, check it out. I have a 19-year-old right now who, never had that training. He's got cancer, and if it metastasizes into the gut, you got about a 90% chance you're dead in 2 years. It's very bad news.
We have another caller with us, and you're on the air with Dr. Tripp on Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine on News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Good morning. I'm calling in just to talk a little bit about the PSA test.
Yes, sir.
You're talking about, not doing it anymore. Well, it saved my life.
Okay.
I had a slow climb in that PSA to where it got to about 8. I ended up having a biopsy, and actually I had 2, and then I ended up having a radical prostatectomy. But it truly saved my life.
Yeah, no, your story is the story of why I still struggle not to do it. In fact, the guidelines are what I said they are, but more often than not, if I have a question at all, I'm doing it in spite of the guidelines that say not to. So that's where the art of medicine still plays into the science of medicine. And I struggle with that because, you're the perfect example of why, the guy who had to go through the prostate biopsies and found out he doesn't have cancer, was still worth it to find yours. So I struggle with how things changed when it was such a dogmatic approach for about 10 years or 15 years, and you reap the benefit of that dogmatic approach. So
I definitely, I'm 64 now, and I probably could turn into be a fairly rapid growing prostate cancer.
Wow. No, that's a great story and proves that we need to treat the individual and not the lab.
Great point. And I want to thank him for the call too as well, and we're glad he's still here. That's the other part of this too. You do reach that age. I have had so many friends who have gone through all of these procedures that it's you go to the diner and you realize, okay, we used to joke about our fathers talking like this, but that's what all the conversations are about now when you're sitting around having a breakfast with these people. But the fact of the matter is, it shows you it is prevalent, and if it's prevalent, all the better to go see someone.
Yeah, things that are new or that persist, even if they aren't a big problem to you, it's worth checking out. I'll give you an easy example. A gentleman we've been working with recently has had some heart palpitations that happened to him mostly when he got sick last fall, and have slowly gotten better, but still persisting. And as I listened to his heart, I heard a few, which made me worry about an irregular rhythm. We've done a test to follow that through, got reassurance by the cardiologist, hey, this is not going to be a life-threatening issue. In fact, it doesn't even necessarily need treatment. And just with that reassurance, the palpitations have kind of diminished. So sometimes we really are sick for a while, and yet our mind plays because we don't know what's going on. So coming to the doctor will often help you put things to rest as well.
We've got to wrap up, but one thing that struck me while you were talking is even though we've backed off on some of these tests, it was all still better than where we were probably 50 years ago.
Oh, by far. Yeah. No, it's and a lot of our troubles are our own doing, and we can talk about healthy eating and weight loss and diet and all that kind of stuff because that's really where the big bang comes from.
Dr. Jonathan Tripp joining us in studio this morning. Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine on News Radio 1310, KLIX, newsradio1310.com. And, of course, Bill Colley with Top Story. Suzanne Hawkins, I believe, is coming up next from the Twin Falls City Council after 9 o'clock news. And remember, next week, same time, Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine.